Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about 14.1, which is scatter plots and associations. Please read the two TEKS that will be described in this lesson, which is 8.11a and 8.5c before you begin. Okay, first of all, the word scatter plot is what this lesson is all about. So, a scatter plot is just a type of graph that relates two sets of data. So you guys know of many other types of graphs. This is just another one to add to the list. It's a type of graph that relates two sets of data. So if we look at an example of this table, okay, if you notice the X side of our table is hours spent studying, and the Y values are represented by the test grades. So I'm relating the hours studying and the test grades. If you notice from the table, as the hours increase, what is happening to those test grades most of the time? Okay, you should have said that they're increasing. So in the next box, as the hours of studying increase, your test grade is going to increase. And that's very similar to real life. The more you study, the better grades you're going to get. So now, since we're relating these two sets of data, we're going to actually graph it to see what the scatter plot would look like on a graph. Okay, so what I want you to do is from the graph, I want you to take the X and the Y values and graph the points to see what a scatter plot would look like. Remember that when we plot points, all of our ordered pairs are X, Y. So we always go over to the left or right first, then up or down. It's a little different than rise over run that we've been focusing on. So this first point is 0, 75. So I'm going to go over 0, up 75. The next point is half and 80. So I'm going to go over to the half mark, up 80. Go ahead and graph the rest of the points to show the relationship between those two sets of data. When you're done, your graph should look like this. Notice, if I read the graph left to right, do you notice that it's positive or negative for the most part? Okay, if you notice, it's going to be a positive graph, right? Or if I had to draw a line, it would be a positive slope because for the most part from left to right, it's going up, besides this one over here, which we're going to talk about what that point is going to be called. So a scatter plot looks like this. It's a graph with points that is going to show the relationship between two sets of data, just like our example with hours studying and test grades. Okay, now there's three types of scatter plots or associations or correlations, and these are the three. The first one, if we look at the X and the Y values, all the dots are sort of all over the place. There's not really an order between them. From left to right, I can't decide if it's going up or down. So this type of scatter plot is called no association. Okay, this next one, if I read left to right, which direction is it going? It's going up. So just like our slope, this is going to be called a positive association. And then the last type of scatter plot, if I read the graph left to right, it's going down for the most part, so this is going to be a negative association. Now, a little bit more details about all of these. With no association, okay, this scatter plot is not going to have a relationship between the X and the Y values, or the sets of data. There's no relationship because the points are all over the place. So a scatter plot that has no association shows there is no relationship between the X values and the Y values. So something like this, if we had two sets of data, okay, and I'm looking, like this note card. If I'm comparing your address and your favorite color, is there any relationship between where you live and your favorite color? No. So this would be a no association type of scatter plot. There's no relation at all. Okay? Now looking at this positive association, from left to right, I'm reading up. And the way that these points are labeled, okay, a positive association shows a relationship in which the X values are going to be increasing. And what's going to happen to the Y values? They're also going to be increasing because they're both positive. Another type of example that would describe two sets of data that has a positive association would be these two things. The rotations of a car tire and the distance traveled by the car. as the rotations of the car tire increase, so it keeps going and going and going, what's going to be happening to that distance? It's most likely going to keep going and going and going as well. So since both of these are increasing, this is going to create a positive scatter plot or a positive association. Okay, and our last type of scatter plot is our negative association. Okay, and so when a negative association, it shows a relationship in which the x values still increase, because as I'm going left to right, I'm still going from left to right, so it's increasing. However, the y values are going what? They're going down. So our y values actually decrease, don't increase. Cross that out and put decrease. Okay, so a type of example with another two sets of data that would describe a negative association would look like this. The temperature outside and the number of coats purchased at the store. Now notice, in each of these, the x values always increase. So this first one's always going to be my x value. If the temperature increases, what's going to happen to the number of coats purchased at the store? So if we consider Texas and in the summer, from June, it might be, 85 degrees, and then we move up to July, which is starting to get in the hundreds, and then August. As the temperature keeps increasing, what do you think the number of winter jackets are going to be purchased at the store? They're going to most likely decrease. So since the temperature increases and the number of coats purchased decreases, this is going to be a negative association. Okay, so those are just a couple more examples of what it would look like with other sets of data. So just to fill out these, this is what's big on how to identify what type of scatter plot it is. When the x values always increase, the y values are going to increase. And since both the x and the y values increase, this is going to be a positive association or correlation. When the x values increase again, but the y values decrease, this is going to be causing a negative scatter plot or negative association. Okay, so those are our three types of scatter plots. And a scatter plot, again, is just when we relate two sets of data. We have a no association when they aren't related at all. We have a positive association, and we have a negative association. Okay, flip it over on the back. Okay, on the back, we're going to describe scatter plots a little bit more and what they would look like. So, looking at these two diagrams, we have a linear association, positive association, which we've already talked about. From left to right, it's going up. Outlier, cluster, nonlinear association, and a negative association. So let's look at the definitions of all these. First one is going to be cluster. And what a cluster is just a cluster of data points grouped very close together. Okay, so if I'm looking at this diagram, the arrows that it's pointing to would be this cluster of points right here and this cluster of points right here. It's going to be just a group of points that are closely related together. Okay, the next one is going to be an outlier. Okay, so an outlier, which is this point right here, sort of sounds like what it is. It's something way out of nowhere. Okay, this is the data point that is very different from the rest of the points, okay, in the data set. So this is sort of the loner. It's outside by itself. It's not really close to anything, but it's still in that graph. So if I'm looking at just a couple more examples, this graph right here shows really good examples of clusters and really an outlier. Okay, how many clusters do you think we have here? I see two clusters. This would be considered a cluster because that's a group of points that are closely together. And then I would probably consider this group a cluster because there's a lot of points clustered together. What would you call this point? This would be an outlier. It's really not in this cluster and it's really not in this cluster either. Another example is basketball shooting. Okay, you can tell that what type of scatter plot is this? Positive, negative, or no correlation. We're talking about shots made and shots attempted. Most likely, if the shots attempted increase, the shots made are going to increase. So this is a positive correlation or positive association. Clusters, I think these are evenly spread out, so I don't think they're closely together. This one I would consider a cluster. But what about this one? This is a really good example of an outlier. It's by itself. It's really not within the other data. Okay, so that would be considered an outlier. Going back to this page, going back to your worksheet, okay, other words in here would be a linear association. Now you guys already know what linear means that it makes a straight line. Okay, so these data points lie along a line. So if you notice this one, it's making a straight line. All these points, I can draw a line, and for the most part, they're very, very close to that line. And you're going to learn in the next chapter what that line is really called in scatter plots. Okay, if you notice here, this one is nonlinear. Nonlinear association is really the same thing as a nonlinear function. The points don't make a line. They don't lie along a line. So if you notice this nonlinear association, it's more of a curved line. It's not a straight line, so it's curved, so which makes it nonlinear. Okay, so let's do a couple practice problems now. Okay, the direction says to use the letters in these scatter plots to answer the following questions. So use the diagram that's on the top of this page and see if you can answer 1 through 5 by yourself. Pause it and take a couple seconds. Okay, number 1 says, which letters point to a cluster? Remember that a cluster are data points grouped closely together. So if I see that this would be considered a cluster, so I'm going to put C. And these group of data points are really close together, so I'm going to put C and D represent clusters. Okay, number 2, which letters point to a positive association? Positive association means from left to right, it's going up. Okay, my X values increase and my Y values increase. So looking at this first graph, from left to right it's going down. So this graph is definitely not a positive association. What about this one? Again, from left to right it's going down. So I don't have any letters that represent a positive association. What about a negative association? So again, negative means it's going down from left to right. My X values increase and my Y values decrease. So from left to right, this is going down. So I know that this graph right here would represent a negative association. So I'm going to put B, because I think B is pointing to that line. Okay, and I also am going to look at this graph, and again, it's going down from left to right. So I'm going to put E, because I feel like the letter E is pointing to that negative association as well. Number 4, which letters point to a linear association? Linear means it makes a straight line. Okay, I notice that this first graph makes a straight line, so I'm going to put A. What about this second one? Do I have a linear association here? No, that would be considered a nonlinear association. So the only letter I haven't used that I think is pointing to the nonlinear association is going to be letter F. Okay, that's all you guys really have to know about scatter plots. Is there's 3 types of scatter plots: no association, positive association, and negative association. And you're going to have to remember the vocab words of cluster, outlier, linear association, and nonlinear association. Tomorrow we'll cover all of this again, and you'll have some practice worksheets to work on that. Have a great evening, and I will see you tomorrow.